Slice the Podcast is brought to you by VegaLend, a different way to get a mortgage. VegaLend provides insight and advice so you can make informed decisions for the future of your family. Welcome to Slice, Property Made Possible. We're a platform on a mission to reduce barriers to home ownership. This podcast is a safe space for our community to learn together and build the confidence required to start on their property journey. When you're ready to start, head along to slicetobuy.com and sign up for your free dashboard.
Kia ora everyone, and welcome to our live podcast for Slice to Buy. I'm Jenna, otherwise known as DJ. Thank you, Moss, for clarifying that. It's a silent D when you see it in type. But yeah, no, look, fantastic to have Simran Kaur as well from Girls Who Invest along with us. Thank you very much for joining us here. But yeah, no, we're very excited to be kicking this off. It's actually real. We've delayed this once or twice and people were asking a lot of questions, but we're live now and excited to get going. So let's kick things off. Let's dive straight in.
Yeah, definitely. We spoke the other day, Sim, about what we wanted to cover today, being it's such a broad topic as it is. And we sort of thought that maybe just bringing your journey to life and sharing your experience would be most valuable for our audience today. So we talk about the steps of buying property in our other episodes. They're narrowed down to 6 steps. The first is where to start. Simple as it may sound, probably one of the biggest barriers. The second being, what can you afford? The third being, how do you manage any relationships if you're going in on property? The fourth being finding that property and doing your due diligence. The fifth being managing that property over time, and the sixth being selling that property. So I think if we just move through those themes, we obviously haven't scripted this because that's not what happens with podcasts, but we've got Sim here and she's podcast queen. So we'll just start with each topic or theme, and yeah, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your trials and tribulations. So the first one was not really knowing where to start. Where did you start?
That's a great question. I began my home ownership journey I started in 2020, which was not the best time to begin. And I didn't buy until March 2021. And my journey began, I had started my first job, started working in 2020, February, COVID hit March, went back home, and realized that I wanted to own property one day. And I remember telling my best friend, I was like, I have this crazy dream. I want to be able to buy a house and I'd like to do it in a few years' time. And so it was really daunting trying to understand how it works, where to begin, who to talk to. And my first step was kind of, reverse engineering the goal and going, well, if I want to buy a home, I probably don't want to spend more than X amount. Let's be a little bit realistic. I can only put down a 10% deposit, and so I should need, $50,000 or $60,000 saved up somehow, some way to begin.
So you immediately started thinking about sort of the finances and what you could come up with. Did you think at all about your values and your why in terms of buying property, like why you wanted that?
I think for me, owning a home kind of equaled stability, and it equaled a level of, well, if anything ever happens to me in life, I've got this one place, it is mine, it is my own, and I'll always have something to come back to. And that was, I guess, my biggest why. It wasn't anything, more around the ideas of maybe getting financially ahead. Obviously, that is one big aspect of it. But to me, it was, I'll always have this place, and that meant a lot to me.
So it's also that emotional stability.
Absolutely.
That's definitely something we've spoken about on other episodes, and 100%. I think, resonates with a lot of people. That's where I guess purchasing a property is slightly different to investing in stocks, which is what obviously you've been really focused on prior to that. Did you see sort of your investment journey as being building that wealth, building those stocks to buy property, or what, are your thoughts around that journey?
That's a great question. So just a little bit of background. I didn't have, parental help to purchase home or a partner. And so I really had to do it myself. And I had because I hadn't worked very long, I had a solid $4,000 in my KiwiSaver to help me on that journey. So it was interesting as to, working out, well, how can I make this money, this, lump sum come a bit faster? And one of the ways was, having my job. One of the ways was upskilling. One of the ways was having a secondary income. And then one of the ways was investing everything I was making into a, investment portfolio. And that was obviously a long time coming. And so I found that by doing all of those steps, I got to that number a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I would have if I just stuck to the first job, saved my way, and kind of hoped it would work out.
Yeah, and so I guess that first step for you became very much about how can I get sort of this minimum amount to embark on that property journey. What did you think that minimum amount was?
I thought I needed $50,000. That was my goal, and I thought once I get there, fingers crossed, property prices don't go up. They did.
And where were you buying?
And so, yeah, putting that together, that was my minimum. I thought, well, there's probably no point almost even trying unless I can kind of see myself reaching that.
Yeah, and I guess that's a challenge with having that deposit as well, is that if you are leaving it in a bank account, obviously you chose to put it in stocks, a wise decision to do something with it. But if you are you're in a high period of inflation as we are now, then you're actually going to find that $50,000 in 5 years' time is worth $25,000. So it is about, okay, if you have that today, if you have $4,000 today, if you have $5,000 today, how can you make that money work for you? And I think when we come to shared home ownership, so Gina and I both purchased obviously with other people, and that's becoming a very valid opportunity, and an opportunity that the majority are actually exploring. Like, you talk about your money journey and kind of how you work to get there. What was that for you, DJ?
Yeah, in a nutshell, I didn't buy with my partner of 3 months, but I did get a small loan from my father that is repayable with interest on it, unfortunately. But yeah, majority I did save. I was a bit of a fierce saver since I started working 6 to 7 years ago. But yeah, no, my experience, I was very tactical after going to 20 to 30 auctions and turned into price bin negotiation, which was the best scenario for me to avoid all that, or a lot of crying, a lot of
pain,
a lot of emotion.
There's a lot of crying.
Yeah, there's a lot of crying. Yeah. They don't talk about that. When you see all the signs, we just purchased a new home. You see
you see the couple, end result, and it's like, oh yeah, you're lucky you're even still in a relationship at that point.
100%.
Love you. And the next sort of theme or pillar is moving into actually how you get that finance. So obviously you've done some mahi, some work to understand, how much you can pull together, whether that's your KiwiSaver, whether that's what you've invested in stocks, taken from your parents. I say taken, but probably borrowed is more accurate most of the time. But once you get to that stage, how did you find sort of engaging with trying to take on lending?
Oh, this is an interesting one. So when I started my journey, I really deep dived and it almost felt like having another degree of like learning how you would purchase a home, what's a pre-approval, when you don't come from a background like that. It's all just jargon and none of it's very helpful. And I did have the privilege of my parents buying a home in 2003. So I went up to them and said, well, how did you do it? And the way they described it kind of sounded like they just walked in, got the home, got the mortgage, and off they went. So they weren't very helpful. And so I had to do a lot of research myself, and it was a lot of online reading, listening to podcasts, going to mortgage brokers and trying to understand what that process looked like. And I had to make a Google Doc of just everything I was learning, because there was so much information that I didn't know and I didn't understand. And it felt quite overwhelming. Again, when you're in the industry, it's, second nature. When you're buying your first home, it's just so overwhelming. And I had to almost do like step one. Okay, I need to go talk to someone. Then I need to understand what my pre-approval is. Then I can, in my opinion, go start looking at homes in that range. So I first went to a mortgage broker. They were great, but they really over-promised, under-delivered, and, single income person, just started working. Obviously, my chances weren't great, and I didn't get much luck with them. So after a couple of months, I kind of broke up with them. It was like the email was really interesting. It was like, it's not you, it's me, I get it.
She's on the market, Vega.
And so I went to the bank directly and ended up somehow, some way actually getting a pre-approval, and I was very excited, and I thought, well, I've only got until this date, like I better start looking before they change their mind.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing about that pre-approval process as well, as people don't understand exactly what that involves. It's funny you say the word overwhelming, because of all of our customer feedback, that's the two kind of themes or conversation starters are, that's too overwhelming, I don't know where to start.
I'm also getting a lot of questions. You guys are an inquisitive bunch.
Yeah, bring some questions in.
There's some really juicy ones, but I'm going to start with just more so with Slice and how it can help people. So one comment more so. I owned a few properties with my then husband, and now I'm back renting after our marriage ended. Sorry to hear that. How could Slice get me back onto the property ladder?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I know who this is from, maybe, which means, I know my audience. But I think there's a lot of opportunities there in terms of going in with other people. Even there's, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, Mum, but as a single mum kind of getting back on the property ladder and having to work hard to get that family home reestablished, that emotional security, and then continue to sort of build your family's wealth. I think there is this opportunity for single women to actually co-invest, and that's something we're definitely looking to support with. Yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity there, and definitely something that I also leveraged in terms of going in on my first property with my mum. And my feelings around that were very much that I actually wanted to own my own property before meeting a partner for that security. So I sort of reverse engineered that bad outcome in a way. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for, if you have kids, having them go in with you. If you know another single mother, co-investing, because it's not a long-term solution. It can be quite short-term. I mean, it was a year before I removed the guarantee with my mum, and she benefited from that, as did I. So it doesn't have to be all and end all. It's more about getting on sooner, and then kind of growing from there.
Awesome. Might just move. We've been talking a lot about finance, maybe more into like the legal side, some of the DD, that means due diligence, sorry.
Yeah, you're meant to be breaking these down.
Yeah, no, I'm supposed to
That's
be
your
defining,
role.
keeping us in check. So Simran, maybe what were the sort of biggest blockers that you experienced in that area that you were saying it was so confusing, that you'd love to sort of help people in this crowd and online better understand?
I didn't even know you needed a lawyer to buy a home.
Amazing.
So that was a great place to start. I just thought, I was like, is this a requirement? And it ended up being an actual requirement. It wasn't a, nice to have option. Remember, this is during, 2021. This was a time when a home would go up on sale on Trade Me. I would contact the broker, and by 5 p.m. they'd be like, oh, the home's sold. So it was quite a, quick, stressful period of time. So I'd found a home I'd like. It went up on Friday. I went in Friday evening to have a look at it because they were just getting snapped up. And that's when I realized I had to get like a lawyer. And again, just very jargon-filled, had to kind of search up, there's actually special lawyers for property. Didn't know that. If this is not your bread and butter, it's just not something that's well known. And I thought it was an interesting experience. I think finding a good lawyer makes all the difference. I think having someone that provides clarity on fees was really important to me, and by doing research I kind of had an idea of a ballpark figure of what I should be paying. Therefore, you know, you don't want to, it's like walking into a car shop and being like, fix my car, but I also have no idea how much this is going to cost, and you could be taking me for a ride, wouldn't know. So it was great to have the education behind it.
Nice analogy there, I think, like bringing in the ride. You could be taking me for a ride. I saw that, Sim.
Thank you. That was accidental. I'm not that clever.
Oh, you're she's smart and she's witty.
And so it was not too stressful to get a lawyer, but just the education around it just wasn't there.
To what you're saying there as well around transparency or lack thereof, that's definitely where Slice tries to come in. So we provide fixed fees. We automate the legal agreements so they're all online. So before you even engage with your lawyer, you're on that journey. You're understanding the decisions you need to make. You're understanding the different structures available to you. And then only when you go to formalize the purchase, then you have to pay. But you already also know what that fee looks like most of the time, unless you're kind of investing in an island.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw the other day, it was actually not me, but I've had lots of compliments on a social post. Shout out to Annabelle, but she was like, how many co-owners to buy that island just off Auckland? And I was like, a lot, probably a lot.
Yeah. You sent me that article too, by the way.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you though, Amy, coming in from Slido. So speaking of legal, can you walk us through your first joint property purchase and the process you went through and how you felt about that?
Definitely. It's an interesting one because it kind of mirrors what Sim was saying, in that I am privileged in terms of my understanding of the law. So I've got a background in law and I've got a background in finance. So I used that, and I kind of, instead of embarking on an unknown journey, I already knew the journey, and I was just documenting that so that I could improve that journey for others. So a little bit niche in that sense, but probably what's most interesting is my mum has not had that same experience. So I think giving that comfort to the other party, whomever that might be, became really important in our relationship, in terms of like, she was very comfortable with purchasing property and even then like growing wealth within property. But then the legal side of things, if you're bringing in different relationships, that was kind of new. And to be honest, it hasn't been well managed, to this point. So it wasn't just new for her, it's still new for everyone right now, in that there's this expectation that you don't require a lawyer or you don't require these agreements. And there's even, outdated laws like the Property Relationships Act, which means that you should split property 50-50 with your partner, irrespective of your contributions. Now, my partner and I haven't done that, and we don't believe in that. And particularly when you're bringing now, often parents will be supporting in some way. So if you've got your partner, yourself, and your parents, and they're all contributing, how is it fair that I benefit from what the parents are contributing? So there's all of these different dynamics that you need to consider. But I was lucky, I guess, that I'd had that experience. Yeah. But I still found it challenging in terms of working out how to communicate and manage that relationship, which was where Slice was born out of, in terms of, okay, what would be ideal? Mum would ask me, well, you've got the legal experience, like, what do you think about this? And I was awkward about it because I didn't want to advise my own mother. Like, that felt like a conflict of interest. So having an objective model like Slice supports with that, and same with my partner. And he'd say the same thing. He's like, I know that lawyer's acting for me. And so it really is about that objective model. And that's something that we didn't necessarily have immediately, but we worked to find together. And that was my biggest legal learning. Yeah. Sorry, very long.
No, I've got a follow-up, and it's a bit of a curveball. Oh gosh, someone remove it. It was asking basically what happens once you're in fractional ownership if suddenly that relationship goes pear-shaped, and how will the platform manage that?
Yeah, so that's a very good carry on, and that's where making those decisions up front, understanding what your intentions are up front, being on the same page up front means when you come to manage the property, when any circumstance changes, you actually know what that looks like. If someone goes they want to sell, you've already agreed that process. So that's where the platform supports it. Actually enables but also requires you to make those decisions and complete those legal agreements so that when you come to sell, you all know exactly where you stand.
Nice.
Sounds simple, but no one does
It's
it.
not. It's really not. So before the selling points, we won't go, so that's a whole other chestnut, right? Going back to you, Simran, in terms of your managing of your property, what sort of words of advice have you got there?
I'm thinking about the fact that your ceiling fell down.
Well, there you go. I don't even know this story, but...
I would highly advise getting house insurance. And that comes from, we were going to do it anyway, but, I bought my property, ended up working out in the end, and I was looking at insurance, and I was like, do I need contents insurance? Probably not. What's going to happen? It'll be fine. Let's just get home insurance. And I was in Canada. My friend was house sitting, and she said, don't freak out. Your ceiling is on the floor. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, has the roof caved in? No, the ceiling was glued on. And the ceiling had very neatly fallen down in the kitchen, living and dining area. It was like a open space, right? Open space.
Right.
Really selling property right now and the platform.
I had built a building inspection done. Nothing had come up there. But long story short, the home was built in a way where it was glued but not screwed, is what the builder said. They had the new... and what had happened is, new laws had come in. We needed to have, I forget the word, insulation. And so the old owners had pink bats installed on top of the old insulation rather than removing it. And so it was a little bit heavier than what it was made to do. And so it very neatly all fell over my couch, over my TV, over the bench.
Graceful.
The insurance lady was like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but this is so funny. I was like, it is funny. But,
It is funny, but it's my house.
but yeah, so get contents insurance because maybe nothing might break into your house, but the ceiling could fall. And get home insurance. And that was my biggest blessing because for a short split second I thought, did I forget to repay my home insurance? Thank God I had. It was about $11,000 worth of insurance, so good lesson.
Yeah, and that's actually why, so DJ talked about the delay of this event, and that's actually why we had to delay this. So the Hawke's Bay flooding, obviously a very difficult time, and I actually couldn't get hold of my mum or other family members for quite a few hours on the day of.
Neither of us could.
Yeah, both of our families. So we're very lucky to be here, and I guess insurance, whilst it's a touchy subject at the moment, very, very important. And on that note as well, if you are looking at a property, and I don't know if you necessarily know this, but you should really do a CoreLogic sum report and get a quote before you even purchase that property so that you know it's readily insurable. So there's lots of small things like that
I feel like that wasn't free before. I only recently went on like ASB and that was available as like a downloadable.
It's just one of those things where there's like so many elements. Like there's about 12 things every time you look at a house, and there's a checklist on the Slice platform for that, but nobody tells you that. So I documented that whilst talking to kind of my banker, being like, so step 1 is this, correct? Step 2 is this, yes? Are you with me? And and like apparently everybody has to individually have that conversation rather than, all share the same step-by-step checklist. So it is daunting if you don't know exactly, what's involved, and that can be very costly if your ceiling falls.
It's funny you say that about the checklist because when I had, up to the point when I then purchased my home, I had that Google Doc with everything I had learned, and when I had friends that were then going to purchase their homes, I shared on the document, and it kind of made me sit back and think what a really terrible, what a really terrible system where I have to like make information and send it to my friends. This stuff isn't readily available. If you're buying a home, like we spend so much time, we spend so much time researching how to buy like our car, or, you know, if you're buying a phone, you look into all the information about it, all the specs. And yet when it comes to buying a house, like how much due diligence do we really do?
Yeah, that's the scary thing. I was like, how are, you know, people that haven't been working in law or finance doing this? And that's extremely scary to me, because clearly there's a lot of people out there just buying without doing their due diligence, which is sort of a step back from manage. But yeah, there's a few things there around whether it's insurance, whether it's actually, you know, building reports, taking a friend round. Like there's a minimum amount you can do, and then there's a safe amount that you can do, and finding that balance is really important. One thing that you talked about just on a call with me the other day was going into the auction house as well, which I find really interesting, because both times actually I have been on the floor. My partner's like smiling at me. He was quite happy with me running that chat. You know, I've got a lot of chat, so here we are. But you know, how did you find that journey, like going to auction, or whether or not you chose to purchase by negotiation? You know, what was your experience in that space?
I decided to go through negotiation just because it was just that weird time where it was too risky to go to auction. I didn't have the confidence, you could say, or the due diligence to buy my first home that way. I wanted to have some level of protection with a conditional, contract or offer, but everything was getting taken up, and it got really desperate. And so I did something that now I look back and I go, oh, that was just me being young and dumb. But what I ended up doing was, I was like, I'm not getting offers because I'm not offering cash, and obviously I don't have the money in cash. So I found a home I liked, that home I saw on that Friday. I messaged my bank. I said, I have a very sophisticated Excel spreadsheet on all the homes in this area, what they've been selling for, and I think I know what this house is worth. So can you give me the go ahead to put a cash offer on this house? And they were like, go ahead, but if it's worth more or less, you have to come up with that difference, which I obviously did not have. And I was like, yep, that's fine. And so I went in, put down a cash offer on this house, based it off just my gut and in this Excel spreadsheet, and just kind of hoped that it would work. And because I did that, I was able to buy the house for cheaper than what other people were offering. And the valuation ended up coming to exactly what I had put down to the T, which was a little bit suspicious on the valuer. But yeah, it worked out.
Another thing on that note, you also can get a valuation from the bank, and that guides what you may or may not offer too, just while we're on that point.
Guides or says what you may or may not offer.
Well, you know, I've put a little bit extra before.
True.
But yeah, it is a negotiation, and I think recognizing that, and also saying I've also done some dodgy things, like not
got that live. That's archived now.
I'm having too much fun up here. You know, you can get a builder to say this is how much that work is going to cost, because every house requires some works. So there is nothing wrong with getting a quote for that work and then negotiating a discount based off that. So there's lots of little things like that where you feel like you're not empowered, but you actually are, and you just need to trust yourself, follow your instincts, do the negotiation and the work. And I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges actually, and also as a female in property purchasing, I think, is not having that confidence and therefore not acting confident. Even if you don't have the confidence, maybe just act confident.
Oh, absolutely. Like the amount of open homes I went to where I just felt like no one was listening to me or like taking me seriously. Like they would go up to the couple rather than, the single person.
You'd be the only single person in the room.
Yes, of course. And
girl.
I learned very quickly that they'd listen to me if I said, hi, I have a pre-approval. Suddenly that would change the conversation. But you had to learn how to bring confidence into the room.
And also asking them, this is one that my mum gave me, because I think as Kiwis we can find it quite hard to be direct in some sense. So being like, oh, what's the price range for this? You know, it took me about 15 houses before I, you know, got the confidence to be like, what is the range?
Did you find...
Sounds simple, but I'm like,
I also
forcing myself into the chat.
It's such it's so interesting how it works, and the nuance of like what you even wear. Like I turned up to a few open homes in a crop top, and I was like, maybe no one's taking me seriously because of how I'm dressing. And even though you can have
I'm too cute for this.
You can have the financial means to purchase a home and dress however you want, but in an ideal world, that just it wasn't working. And I remember you talking to me about some of the tactics you put in your dressing.
This was in our private conversations, not on the podcast.
Let's share with the room.
Share with the room. I was saying, I mean, there's an element of big something energy when you go to an auction house. And I took my fake Louis Vuitton bag in and... like all of my most expensive kit, and I was looking good and feeling fierce. And then I negotiated the shit out of that and we bought the house. So part of it might be your own self-confidence, but it's also it is a vibe. I mean, we've got some auctioneers in the room this evening, and I know that they're suited and booted at the time, So I think you do have to at least acknowledge that there's a culture around that still, particularly in the auction house, and either acknowledge it and ignore it or play the game. What about you, Deej? Like in terms of your...
I wasn't wearing crop tops in the auction houses.
What were you wearing?
I was probably just wearing activewear coming straight from work and just looking stressed.
See, that's a tactic too, though. Like, I don't even care. And then they're like, oh, she's got money.
Yeah. Well, I did actually, admittedly, bring a good friend of my mum's in who kind of looked like my grandfather, sort of standing.
Yeah, that's solid. That's solid.
And he was just like, just be quiet, just watch, and he would just give, time me.
Was there a bit of a come in at the last minute kind of?
Yeah, pretty
that
much.
strategy.
Yeah, and then tell you when to cut and run, basically. So having someone who's a mentor in that way with you is helpful if you're going in particularly alone.
Definitely.
But going back to Slido, in this market, this is a good question for both of you. In this market, what's the benefit of property ownership, which is high cost and high maintenance, as an investment strategy over stocks, which are liquid?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it comes down to leverage. That's always the answer. I think investing in shares and funds are a great way to begin. I couldn't get on the property ladder without that. But the benefit of property ownership is, of course, leverage. And, you can put in $10,000 into shares or, co-own and put $10,000 into property. And the property, even if it doesn't make the same gains, you make much more because of that leverage that you put in. In terms of the other benefits, obviously shares are a lot more liquid. That's great. But in New Zealand, I think to even get one home is a great struggle right now, and to be able to do that and have that as a goal, is really at the forefront of a lot of young people's minds. We see it a lot in our community, and we see a lot of people go, well, I should probably just start investing so that eventually I can purchase a home. So even if they invest in shares, the goal often is to then transfer that into property.
Right.
I
was not warned about that.
I just bought this and I love it, and I was like, that was the correct answer. Thank you so much. Leverage. So essentially, if you have 10 grand and you put that 10 grand into shares, that's cool. But if you have 10 grand and you co-own with other people, you can turn that 50 grand into 500 grand. And that's where your purchasing power increases, your investment and power increases, and your wealth increases. So yeah, I mean, it's a journey though. Wherever you're at, you have to find that balance. And I also think it's circumstantial. We talked about it being also your emotional security. So the circumstances are important too. If you have a young family and you want them to be in a home right now, then that's also important. It's not about being like, oh, I'm going to wait 5 years. But also, yes, the interest rates are increasing, but
that is one question I've got.
Yeah, but Auckland's undervalued, Christchurch is undervalued. There's a lot of purchase prices that you can benefit from right now. It might be, a period of time where you're paying a higher level of interest, but the actual cost of investing right now is much better than it was, 6 months, a year ago. So it's always a mixture of factors, and you always have to weigh up your own circumstances, but leverage in terms of stocks, and then in terms of, interest rates versus purchase price, it's just like, can you afford to make those repayments? That's what that comes down to right now.
So going back to Slice as a platform, Amy, does the platform make recommendations for partnerships in terms of insurance and legal, and how objective is that advice?
Yeah, so we work with a variety of partners, so it's all pretty objective in a sense that we kind of sit across the top and we try and create the best possible experience for someone going through that buying journey. We do pick the best partners, some of them are in the room tonight. So that is, we do make an effort to be discerning around who we're working with for sure, and that's more based on my gut and the values that I feel when I meet the people that I'm working with. But that is important to us. But there's a variety, and we don't funnel you into one, part. You can actually work with your own partner at one area and then one of ours at another area, and we can still support that. So the goal is still the same. We're trying to reduce barriers and support you on your journey.
Okay, this is a curveball. What's your vision for Slice 5 years from now?
I was watching the Spotify, it's called The Playlist, and I've been enjoying that a lot because this journey's been a lot longer than even our launch, a few months ago. And it's a challenge between, they always say, think global, act local, think global, act local. But I can't help but have quite big dreams for how this could look, not just for New Zealand, but for the world. I think everybody deserves and should have the opportunity to own their own home. That doesn't have to be 100% of that home, but home ownership should be accessible in the same way that shares and investing in stocks has become more and more accessible. So with a really small amount of money, you should be able to leverage that money and purchase property. So moving back to that, rather than, you can currently invest in shares of a property, but you can't, syndicated property, but you can't actually leverage to do that. So the big hairy goal of mine is to syndicate property so that you can leverage to invest and still gain that purchasing power from, 10 grand, 20 grand, whatever it might be.
Awesome. So another pretty good question. What happens if you already have a home and decide to fractionally own another property in terms of tax and capital gains?
This is a really good question and something we're doing a bit of work on at the moment. Yep. Who was that now? So that's actually, we're focusing very much on investors as the next kind of partnership or group that we're working with. And there is some ability to, if you're supporting someone else into their first home, there's some capability to avoid some of the restrictions around investment. So that's a TBC perhaps, but there is definitely some ways that you can benefit by co-owning in that investment property or that second property that you're going into, and that's what we're working through at the moment. Questions? You said some. For Sim.
Yes. So, Sim, where did you purchase the house that you bought, and at what price, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, of course. I bought in Hamilton. I was living there at the time. And the area that I bought in, when I first moved out of home, my friends and I went to flat there. My friends were medical students, and so it was quite close to the hospital. And when we were flat searching, one thing I realised is they didn't care how crappy the homes were. As long as they were close to the hospital, they would rent them, and they were getting snapped up like this. And so we would just go to every single home in the radius of the hospital, and they were so desperate to rent these places out. They were like, please let us have this place, and they'd get snapped up. And so I kind of made a mental note of that, thinking, wow, this is like a really interesting situation where these homes are getting picked up by really good tenants, because medical students don't do that much besides study, and are getting picked up quite quickly, and then medical students have a system where once they're done with the year, they then just refer the flat on to the next group of medical students, and it just kind of, keeps rotating. And so when I could purchase, I really just purchased down the road from where we were staying. And I purchased it for $565,000.
Nice. So that goes to show as well in terms of you also don't have to buy in the most expensive place for that first purchase too.
No, it was great. It was this 2-bedroom standalone brick house with a little garden. And because of its location, it was a lot cheaper than the area, but the rent was better and the quality of tenants were better.
Yeah, so high yield. It's an interesting one in that my approach was probably slightly different, but it was more kind of capital that I was looking for, but I've turned it into high yield. But I bought in Raglan in a similar probably vein to you, as being like, I can either afford something really dusty in Auckland and I don't want to live there anyway. So like I'm either buying this house that's not that nice and probably quite far out, so I'm going to rent that out and live closer to the city anyway. Or I can actually open up my whole horizon, buy wherever I want, still rent that out and live where I want in Auckland. And so that's what I did. And similarly to you, I actually just saw it online, it was a bit of it's hard to remove the emotion, but I saw it and it was like wooden rafters. I was like, that's my batch. And so I like to think
that it's a very cool spot.
It's cool,
it is very you.
We had New Year's there one day, one weekend as well. It was very fun.
I don't remember it.
But yeah, so I mean, there's different strategies, but also it's very much your circumstance. So if you are happy to live in that house and that's very much what you want to do, then do that. But if it's not cutting the mustard, then don't be afraid to invest in a property that you're not going to live in, right away or if at all.
And in my experience, it was more I wanted to live in it for a bit, and then after a year, turn it into a rental. So buying it with the idea in mind of I don't have to love this place. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be something I can live in and then feel good about to rent on.
Exactly same with me. But then you're living in a construction site for a year.
Yes.
So.
Oh yeah, we didn't bring up your toilet.
Which one? Well, the toilet, the laundry. Pick an issue.
That's a managed situation.
We won't take everyone here on that journey.
Yeah.
You'll find out when you get a property if you haven't got one already. This is a pretty good one. Will Slice have leverage to negotiate deposits or interest rates with banks?
Will we have leverage?
Interesting question.
You are our leverage.
Yeah.
The more customers that we
framing.
work with, the more customers that engage with and want or demand a different way to buy a home, the more power we have to change some of those banking products. So obviously my background is in banking. And yeah, I mean, there's been resistance definitely to change and revise those products in the same way that there is to revise the law. It's time consuming. It's boring. It's not that, profitable for them. The same with the Relationship Properties Act. Like that's just not been revisited since the 70s. So it's more about right now we can work with them as is, but the more that people require this, yes, the more leverage we'll have. I mean, in the first 3 months, we've had about 170 customers move through the platform. So things are, people are demanding that change and are demanding different ways to get into property. So, yeah, definitely there's that opportunity. There's also some of our partners that I know are looking to do some more disruptive kind of lending too. So lots of opportunity for sure.
This is quite a general question. It's not specifically on property, though you can draw on that if you'd like. How do you, as a business owner, particularly a startup, how do you get over the fear of failure?
This has got to be for both of us.
This is definitely for both of you.
Yeah.
How do you get over the fear of failure? I think in the work that we've done, for those that maybe don't know my journey, I run Girls That Invest, and we really grew quite quickly over the last 3 years, and it's a question we get a lot. I don't think you get over the fear of failure. I think you just enjoy failure and you see it as a tool to fail upwards, like everything we've done.
I love that, failing upwards.
Failing upwards, I think the difference between us as a media company and maybe the work that's happened that hasn't maybe grown as fast has been just from our desire to throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. And doing that enough times, you go, oh, people really enjoy this, or they love that, we'll do more of that. Oh, we did that, that bombed, will do less of that. And the more stuff you put out there, the more you'll learn what works. And that's such a simple way of talking about business, but I think in all the businesses that I've run, that has just worked time and time again, just failing upwards.
That's definitely
what about
it
you,
for
Amy?
startups. I mean, I feel like you'll have some views on this too, but yeah, I think I don't fear failure at all. In fact, I embrace it. Like if I'm failing, then I'm trying. If you're not failing, then you're failing. In a way, like
No,
I think
that actually makes
you're
sense.
failing by not trying,
Yeah.
and I think all you can do is try. That's like, and also when you change the way that you compare yourself to others by using that as a comparison, that changes your whole mindset. If you go, oh, for me to fail is a positive thing, then you're only comparing yourself to your own behaviors. But if you go, I failed because someone else did this better, or I failed because of this, then that's actually, you know, a dangerous territory to be in. Whereas taking the mindset of, oh, when I fail, it's just not me doing the best or where I want to be, but it is that failing upward. It's that failing upward and just knowing that by failing, at least you're trying. And once you change that, when you're trying, you're only competing against yourself as opposed to competing against arguably other successful and non-failing, I don't know, people.
I think because we're getting really close, pretty much just over an hour, but I'll just start with why, Sim, you got into financial education, and then I want to hear, Amy, why you got into tech and housing. If you want to maybe summarise for everyone here.
Oh, that's a great question.
Live.
I think it comes back down to my why I bought a home as well. I think when it comes to the life that you can live, it really does depend on your resources, and oftentimes those resources depend on if you have capital, and you know, whether it's your health outcomes, whether it's your education, whether it's your ability to leave a relationship or be stuck in one. It all comes down to, well, do I have the means to go, what we like to call taxi money? And that can look like having an emergency fund, that can look like co-owning or fully owning a home. And by having those options, you then kind of live a life that you want to rather than a life that you have to. And so that's why we do what we do.
Love that. And you, Amy?
Yeah, I think similar in terms of that financial freedom or financial independence, very formative for me. It's quite hard because my mum's looking at me as I as I'm talking. But yeah, I mean, from a young age, my parents separated, and I saw my mum work really hard to reestablish our family foundations, to, you know, get us back into a family home, and then take that family home, renovate that, and move into the next home. And that was, just a really big part of my journey, was knowing that I didn't want to be in that situation. She did an amazing job, but I guess I wanted to own property, you know, first. I didn't want to have to wait for maybe something to go wrong. I wanted that financial security, independence, emotional security, independence that was taken away from my mum at that time. So, yeah, it was a very deep-seated kind of probably motivation, and it's taken me a while to understand what drives me, but that's definitely it. And then in terms of the tech element, I just think tech's amazing in its ability to scale, to enable the masses. Like, it is about accessibility. What we're doing, what you're doing with Girls That Invest, we're trying to create, you know, education for all, access for all, whether that's your ability to grow wealth from $5 into 10, or, you know, into your first home. So I think that's where tech is super powerful, and I'm super excited to be, leveraging that, I guess, on this journey.
Big time, yeah. Fellow tech wahine here.
There you go.
I might round off asking, it wasn't in Slido, but does Amy have any more gags that DJ doesn't know about? That's my last question.
No, DJ, but you've done an amazing job, and you know, you're a strong tech wahine, so
100%. then.
No matter what technical issues we undertake, I know we can do it together. And it's so easy having Sim here as well. So thank you so much. You literally come in and, you know, we're live streaming, we're live producing, we're trying to get Slido working, and Sim just comes in and you've got a real calmness about you, and we really appreciate that. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for
Thanks
having
so
me.
much, Simran. Thank you, everyone here. I knew it didn't end. I knew it had ended.
It actually gets so good.
Hang on, wait. Yeah, this is so good, eh? I love
That's
this
outrageous.
piece of kit.
I don't even know what to say.
I'm having way too much fun. I bought it the other day and I'm like, oh, new hobby. I think that's startups for you. It's like you get real obsessed with something. But yeah, seriously, thank you, Sim. Thanks, DJ,
thank you,
for
Simran.
co-hosting.
My pleasure.
And
Always
also to producer Mike, to you guys, our community.
Yeah. So there is a podcast series coming that producer Mike did back-to-back filming of over a weekend.
We've
14
got a
episodes.
whole season that follows. So
do.
yeah, keep an eye out. Smash that subscribe. That's actually what producer Mike told me to say. I'm not even joking. And thank
we're
you to
influencers.
Vegaland and Bailey's. You guys are amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's it. I'm going to end record and yeah, have another pause. You can actually crack them without interrupting us from now on.
We know who you are.
Mingle.
We heard
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Altogether better with Bailey's. With over 800 residential agents nationwide, contact your local office to start your property journey.